When we had this conference 2 years ago here, one of the most popular sets of presentations were our partner updates. So we have Typify. We don't do everything by ourselves. We have lots and lots and lots of partners who help us do what we need to do. So we have Phil Barrett here from Delta XML, who is going to give us a quick update on what they do with us, or what they actually do, which is a really great product. Lots of standards bodies use it, and we're actually integrating this into our financial services product. And I think Caleb mentioned this is going to be our first third-party plugin coming up.
Great.
Phil.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm tempted to offer a cheap shot and ask some questions, and the first one would be, whose content changes? That would be unfair, because I'd probably get 100% results. So I'm going to keep this as short as possible. We're about, as it says there, change management. We're a black box technology. We have no GUI, despite the fact on almost every demo that we do, people say, can you show us what it looks like in HTML? Well, we can, but that's not what we're about. We're about accuracy, speed, and identifying change. So, first of all, where do we find the use cases for change and our technology? So content creation, it was really great to see Arbortext in action with the tags on mode. That takes me back to my SGML days. That's where I come from. I used to work for the Thomson Corporation way back when. So content creation, both in an XML form, but also more and more, our content is not just document-centric, it's data-centric as well. So we have many customers who are using Delta XML to look for differences in data, and I'll come back and talk about that. The key area, the key use cases for us and they're linked, are review and publication, and that's what we've been hearing a lot about this morning. So the principles behind the identification of change and then the ability to show that change at the review stage is really important. So we have a product called Delta XML Compare, and that will give you, in XML, using XML, the differences between your content. So in the review stage, the idea is that we are able to detect or identify and then show XML in formats that your reviewers might be more comfortable in. It could be XML, it could be PDF or HTML. The main comparison is A to B. So here's one document, here's another document. What's the comparison? And that's Delta XML Compare. We've recently, as part of the purpose of this is an update, we've now introduced Delta XML Merge. And the idea of merge is it takes away the serial nature of a review process and allows you to have a common ancestor. Some people may be familiar with this, a common ancestor, and then n number of people editing or changing or reviewing and making changes into that common ancestor. Delta XML Merge can then take those, push them back into the common ancestor to create the next version. And all of those changes, Phil, Chandy may have made changes, are all then pushed back into that delta, and then you can have technology or scripts that will then say, okay, the final review can discuss whether Chandy's are accepted, mine are accepted, etc., etc. So that really speeds up the sort of the traveling draft approach versus the parallel review approach. And then publication. I know that ISO was mentioned yesterday in connection with Delta XML. I know that ISO are using Delta XML at the front and the middle use cases there, but particularly in the publication area where they're able to create PDFs with meaningful change tracking or identification and display of change that can go to their consumers to speed up the reviewing process. So there's no doubt what's changed, who changed it, when it was changed, if there's an audit needed of that change. That's all the stuff that we do. So, moving on, some customers, I'm bound to do that, forgive me. There's a lot there that I can't put on for obvious reasons, NDAs, etc. What we are finding is Delta XML or XML in general, it's not fair to say it from a vendor point of view, is used more and more as a data format. And with the digital age, we were at an event about cybersecurity on Wednesday, and XML is used throughout the cybersecurity industry for transmitting messages, and that I can't go into any more detail because I don't know enough, but suffice to say that it's an interesting area for us in terms of detecting change. You can imagine if subtle changes are taking place in content and data, then it's interesting to be able to detect it. Okay, so this diagram basically takes us through a typical content comparison. So we have input A, input B, delta XML. As I say, I can't reiterate enough that it's a black box technology that is 9 times out of 10 operated as a server that's embedded into our partner's technology. So we're not a content management system, we're not an authoring tool. We are, as I say, 99% used as a black box technology embedded. We do have named user licenses, so someone can put Delta XML on their laptops, should they choose to, and script against it, no problem at all. So then from the comparison that takes place in that center triangle, then we can output to Redline content, XML, data, question mark. One of the things we can output is a patch, and that means that we can output the detected changes in an XML document. The reason we did that to start with was because what we could do is take 2 documents on a server over here, create a comparison over here, and instead of sending them back again, we just send the changes back that can be applied to the content over here. Does that make sense? So that speeds up the transmission. However, broadband and technology's taken over now, whereas that's not such a big use case anymore. But it's still useful to be able to take 2 pieces of content and just have an XML document that contains just the changes. So the comparison, let me just go through the bullet points here. As I've discussed, identify and manage. The comparison, general XML. More and more, we're being asked about HTML, XHTML, HTML5. And of our recent prospects, HTML5 is becoming more and more important. I'm not going to say why, I'm not sure why. Obviously, as a publishing medium, it's important. But for us, it's important because it's very easy for us to be able to get hold of HTML5 and very quickly show the differences in a meaningful way. Maybe some of you have heard of DITA, certainly heard of DocBook in this audience. Same for Merge. I'm not here as a specific sales pitch, but Merge is being taken on by very large organizations who are using it as a bureau service, so that people who are submitting content to their servers are using Merge to help that content go into an initial early ancestor. So just a slide that just talks about the main differences between an XML-aware comparison and merge tool, where the line-based diff tools, I'm sure anybody who does any programming, it's unaware of syntax. Just report the changes into a one-shot patch file. Users are not aware that there's anything better. We get that a lot. People come to us and say, wow, I wish we'd known that Delta XML was available earlier. The key thing about Delta XML is it handles XML structure. So if something changes, if someone moves an attribute or changes where it is or moves a list item, you can choose to either find those things and record them or not. If it's not significant, then turn that ability off. So you can look at what's happening with your structure and ignore what's between the angle brackets if necessary. I mean, normally it's a combination of both. So that's the way it's used. As I say, referring back to the tags on mode, my favorite mode. If you're not using tags on, you should get used to it. It's the only way to author. So we use tags, obviously visually as well as embedded in the XML, to infer the changes. So we're not taking it out of it into any strange kind of language that's not used. It's XML, and that's why you can extract a specific XML file and use that to create the changes. And as I say, it understands the XML syntax, avoids false positives. I love that phrase, false positives. So, benefits, 100% accuracy. From a workflow management point of view, I know because we get told it speeds things up. If you can review and see the reviewing and manipulate the reviews more quickly, then it will certainly help in terms of the workflow management. I'm not going to go through all of those. The key thing here that's happening in our world, we now talk more about document-centric versus data-centric detection of change. And we're getting more and more interest in data-centric changes. Just a couple of quick examples. I think, yeah, there's management of configuration file update. So a very large West Coast database vendor is using Delta XML to cut down the support call times from their customers. So what's happening is that they deploy the database with a configuration file. They stop at a certain point and say, okay, this is deployed. If there's then comes back and the customer says there's something gone wrong, they fire Delta XML at that configuration file versus the one that they knew they walked away with. If there's anything significant in that, they can say very quickly, okay, this is where it's changed. You changed it, your problem. So that's financial data I'll come on to in the update slide. Network configuration data. I can mention this. Alcatel-Lucent, who were recently acquired by Nokia, they use Delta XML for data where they're deploying very large network management systems globally, and that network management system is all deployed using XML. And so again, using the differences, they can very quickly find out what's going wrong. Okay, the update. As I say, we've talked about merge, rapid collaborative review support, one-to-end comparison and merge. We're commonly getting requests so the technical people in here for the REST API, so using HTTP, HTTPS as a way of controlling Delta XML. That is something that's coming right to the top of the product roadmap and will be done this year. Document comparator API, technical stuff. Basically, we've created an API that's document aware so that it saves people programming against Delta XML a lot of time. So it understands the fact that this is a document and you don't have to program as much against that. Speed improvements, parallel processing. New licensing platform. Anyone familiar with FlexLM? Yeah, very well-known licensing platform. It means that we can much more securely and better use concurrency in terms of users and licenses. The important thing about that is the concurrent servers, where we have very large deployment of Delta XML. They're usually in a virtual environment and they need to spin up servers very quickly, and so it's easier to use a license management system. Finally, new markets for us. We're hearing, as I've said to you before, HTML, HTML5, JSON is becoming, we're hearing that all the time. It's probably not in your specific area. And data is becoming more important for us. Other XML standards that we're looking at, XBRL keeps popping. Anyone familiar with XBRL? It's the Extensible Business Reporting Language. Massive industry, huge amount of content that's being filed to the regulators, and the use cases are just abundant for detecting change in that standard. S1000D for the military and usually the aircraft industry. And as I say, cybersecurity, we're getting inquiries to check differences between streams of content that are huge, and then there may be one tiny little bit of change that we can do rapidly and indicate where that is. Thank you very much.